what's black and white and red all over? The common answer to this question is a newspaper. But in the context of college forensics, it could just as easily be a script book. However, there is a movement in place hoping that this will no longer be the case. If we want to environmentally freshen up forensics, then we need to get rid of script books. The problems with script books are twofold. We can look at the problems that script books present in two ways, by looking at their manufacture and at what happens to them after they are no longer in use on the forensic circuit. But first, their manufacture. The plastic alone used in a script book creates a domino effect in its manufacture that has widespread consequences on our environment. First of all, the plastic used in making a script book is made from petroleum products. Thus, they must be mined. This not only decreases our world supply of this non-renewable resource, it also affects the habitats of many animals and plants, some of which become endangered as a result. Thus, this is only what happens in the manufacture, however. We must also look at what happens to our script books after we have used them in forensics. Once we are done using our script books, often we just throw them away. People say, why not recycle them? This would get rid of this problem, and that would be wonderful if it were a common thing to recycle small black binders. The problem being that binders are not easily recycled. They have many components making them up, including plastic, cardboard, and metal, and most recycling centers are not prepared to deal with that. There is one binder recycling program in place, run by the American Thermoplastic Company. However, this is aimed at large companies rather than the individual citizen, and it costs money to recycle your binders. So it is much easier to simply throw them away, where they join what in 2008 was 30 million tons of plastic contributing to municipal solid waste, according to the EPA. That was only in 1 year. Of course, many would argue that the effect on the environment is great, but the effect that getting rid of script books would have on forensics would be so cataclysmic that we should not even consider it. Look at this. It is possible to look at this rationally and to see that not only are script books no longer being used for their original purpose, but that phasing them out could actually be a good thing for forensics as an activity. The original purpose of script books was to be used in interpretation events to keep them more grounded, to keep them more of a public address event than an acting event. However, the use of script books has become more of an encumbrance than an anchor. The competitors and their coaches are expending more energy trying to get around the rules governing script books than they are using in actually honing their performances. Most performances are fully memorized. The competitors do not even refer to their books. They are simply stashed at their ribcage or used as a prop to gesture, which is clearly not the original intent of using script books. As such, we have completely moved away from what was originally intended, and it is probably better to simply get rid of them rather than trying to continue working around this encumbrance. If we are looking at this logically, is it not better to look at the way forensics is now, and instead of holding on to this older notion that the interp category needs to be more firmly grounded, and perhaps see if there's a way that forensics can grow and change? We can also see that the forensics is the only thing keeping the industry alive that currently is manufacturing these little black binders. If forensics were to decide once and for all to get rid of script books, then we might have a chance to get rid of some of the wastes and toxins being put out into our world by their manufacture. These script books were originally intended by the companies producing them as day planners, but with the new proliferation of electronic ways to keep track of our days, the forensics world using them as script books is the only thing that is keeping these binders in production. If the forensics world were to decide that they no longer needed them, the companies would probably no longer have a market for their product and would stop producing them altogether, thus, even in a small way, reducing the impact of the manufacture of these plastics on our world. Having looked at the problems with script books and the impact that getting rid of them would have on both the activity and the world, we can now look at the best way to implement the removal of script books from forensics. Firstly, we would have to start at a national level, making sure that all national leagues, organizations, and tournaments stopped using script books. This would then have a trickle-down effect to the invitational tournaments that are held around the country, and eventually college forensics as an activity would no longer use these script books at all. Also, we must look at how getting rid of the script books does not mean simply abandoning interpretation events to the wolves. The boundaries in place on interp events must be both maintained and strengthened in the absence of script books to provide their theoretical anchor. Now that forensics people know that script books are not providing the needed anchor for interp events to keep them from going too far from the public address path, new boundaries may need to be put in place, allowing those who control forensics to rethink the way that interp is framed, and to see that maybe it is better to allow it to wander away from the public address format, and to allow for different forms of public expression in the realm of competitive speaking. And so, we have looked at the problems and solutions inherent in getting rid of script books in forensics. Environmentally, this would be a wonderful thing to decrease the impact that forensics has on the world around us. It would decrease harmful emissions in the manufacture of script books, and it would cut down on the script books that are being manufactured only to be thrown away a few years later as the forensics competitors leave college and no longer have use for them. So perhaps one day someone will be able to ask, what's black and white and red all over, and not have to think of the forensic possibilities.